Hi guys, how is everyone today? Good. Yeah, good. I know you've all been sitting for a few hours, so hopefully you'll be patient with me I'm going to try and make this real quick. Hopefully we'll be done by, I was going to say noon, but maybe 10 after, okay? So how many people have seen this kind of advertisement? Either in the newspaper, on the internet, you might get a blog or a pop-up that will give you that. It's a scam. Okay, same as if you look in the paper, you know, in the advertisement section of newspapers, you'll frequently see advertisements saying, earn extra money by sending stamped addressed envelopes for us. It's a scam, okay? Just like if you receive information on the internet, it's a big, big thing right now. I just got one the other day, actually, and where they're getting my email address from, I don't know. You get one, you delete it, you get another half a dozen. And it's where they say, good morning, madam. I'm a businessman in Nigeria, and we need your assistance in creating some funding exchanges in Canada. And then they get into, we'll send you a check for $400,000, and all you have to do is deposit that into your bank account and keep $50,000. Because we just need you to write a check for $350,000. So you do that, and guess what? The bounce checks, and you're on the hook for all that money. Okay? Next slide, please. So this is me, the next one. Oh, yeah, you might have to keep clicking.
So what do you do about that bounce check?
Well, unfortunately, it's a scam, so the bank won't give you your money back. Your only option is to report it to the police, and we try and track it, but it's very difficult because they're from abroad. And the charges that then would exist in that country, and we literally have to wait for them to come back. We can write warrants and wait for them to cross the border, but they frequently use different names. So it's very difficult for us to catch them.
So you bring that letter to the police then?
You could bring the letter, bring everything, yeah, the check too, as well as documentation from the bank. You have to keep clicking it, Adam. It's one of those. I didn't want it to do this. So this is me. I actually work in Norfolk County. So this is not my patrol zone. But if you contacted any OPP officer, anyone can put you in touch with the right person. So my contact information is going to be right at the end, and please feel free to write it down, because if you do get stuck and you contact me, I will direct you to the relevant person here in Haldeman. So why does financial abuse occur? Can anybody shout some reasons out? Undue influence, you've got one there. What else? What are the reasons? Why does it occur?
Trust.
Pardon me?
Trust.
Trust, yeah. Or deceit, somebody is misleading you. What else?
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability, yeah. What else? Just click them all up. So directly through a power of attorney, joint bank accounts, controlling access to documents through family and friends, emotional and or physical abuse. And let me just say something here. When financial abuse occurs, it's generally from a police perspective. It's not a standalone abusive situation. There's usually something else going on. And generally we find that physical abuse, it usually works in tandem with financial abuse. And we can go into that a little bit more later. Threats, intimidation, and actual physical violence, isolation and susceptibility. Those two go hand in hand, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm just putting the topics on the board for now. Home renovations and the cold knock approach. So let me go through all these things. Undue influence, what is that? Can anybody give me a Coles Note version of what is undue influence? Yeah, or it could be a situation where, you know, I'm an older lady and I live alone, and I have a neighbor who can influence me in a way that I'm not really acknowledging it's happening, okay? So she's unduly influencing me to do something that I really wouldn't normally do. And that can be through any avenue. You can be abused through a power of attorney, and it's very important to be aware of this, because a power of attorney, they're doing business as if you would. So when you give control to a power of attorney, for all intents and purposes, they become you. And as our lawyer friend said earlier, there's different types of power of attorney. But once you give someone total control of your day-to-day issues from a financial perspective, you have to really trust that person, especially if you're in a mode of incapacity or you're going into a state of incapacity. So, you know, as we get older, we move into states of dementia or Alzheimer's, and you really need to be aware of the fact that your power of attorney has to be a trusted person. My suggestion is that you should have a joint power of attorney. So that two people have to work together in your best interest, and it kind of lessens the opportunity for you to be financially abused. Joint bank accounts. Several years ago, and thank goodness it's not like this anymore, but several years ago, some financial institutions would suggest that you put a family member on your bank account as a joint holder. And that was to facilitate when you eventually moved on to the next chapter, you know, you passed away, it would make it easier for your loved one to have access to your account. Because predominantly what happens when you die is your accounts are frozen, the banks are pretty good at paying the bills and any necessities, but otherwise the account is frozen. So it was a way to give your loved one access to your joint account quickly. And it's very common when you're in a spousal relationship, and I would say for the most part that's okay, but I wouldn't recommend that you do a joint account with a child. Unfortunately, the highest incidence of financial abuse to elderly people is family members, and the most prevalent family member is a son, believe it or not. So I would be very, very careful about putting people on joint bank accounts. You know, you're going to pay a very small fee to the government to get those bank accounts accessed again. And really, you know, if you have 3 or 4 children and your will states that they're all entitled to equal shares of that estate, and your one trusted loved one goes and empties out that account because they were joint, that leaves your other children without anything. So it's better to pay that small fee and make sure everybody gets their fair share, the pound of flesh. Another way that I see people get abused quite frequently is controlling access to documents, families, and friends. And a very common one, or I shouldn't say very common, one that we came upon quite recently is, it's kind of a strange situation, and I'm not quite sure why this is happening, because legally a power of attorney is you. For all intents and purposes, a power of attorney is you. So what has happened is, this elderly person has made a loved one a power of attorney. But this elderly person has also made a different loved one, their siblings, a joint account holder on her accounts. So we have a power of attorney who has the power to control those accounts, and we have a person who is joint account holder. Now it's important to know that from a legal perspective, a power of attorney can they can complete transactions, but they cannot complete transfers. It's illegal for a power of attorney to do a transfer from their account to your account, okay? From your account to their account. They are not allowed to do that. They can pay any bills, which is a transaction, but they cannot make a transfer. That should be an alarm bell if that's happening. So basically what happens is the power of attorney notices that there's some inconsistencies on the bank account and questions the joint account holder, and the joint account holder says, it's none of your business because I'm a joint account holder on that account, it's my account. And the bank is taking the stance that at this point we can't give you the power of attorney information on that account because although you're a power of attorney, we're going to infringe on that joint account holder's privacy. So that's a bit of an issue that we're questioning right now. I'm not sure where we stand legally. Maybe the bank people can talk to me at the end and let me know what the status is with that. Threats, intimidation, and actual physical violence. You know what? It's sad that we spend our whole life working hard, creating a comfortable environment, and we end up being physically violated by people, whether it's a loved one or a personal service worker or a nursing home, it's pretty sad. Isolation and susceptibility tend to go hand in hand again with financial abuse, because if I am abusing my parent, I don't want anybody to know. So I'm going to keep my parent locked away so they can't tell anybody. Home renovations are another way of being abused, and that's our lawyer friend talked briefly about roofing. People will approach you at your home, which we refer to as a cold knock approach, and they are allowed to do that legally, but there are certain things that they are not allowed to do, which are falsifying documentation, falsifying statements. They have to provide you with all the details, and it has to be honest and truthful. It cannot be misleading or fraudulent in any way. So other causes, the senior is isolated and living alone. We talked about that. They're not mobile and they can't drive and they're wheelchair bound. So they really rely on other people to help them, to get them around. There are no other family members or friends nearby, and there's little contact with anyone, because once a person becomes an abuser, they're very good at controlling every single situation. Access to the phone, access to the internet. They'll sit there and listen to conversations. So, we as people that may be seeing this should be aware of the fact that there's some alarm bells going off here, and call the police. I would rather have 50 calls a day that are false than miss that one call, because believe me, I'm going to give you some case examples that are going to shock you at the end. A person, as we get older, when we're living alone, we become in a state of loneliness, and we can become gullible and very easily influenced. And what happens is, on these cold knock approaches, and I'm going to give you a few examples of this in a case that I investigated recently in Delhi, is, I'm a lonely person, my kids live away, we maybe talk on the phone once a week because, let's face it, kids have family and everybody gets busy. So it's been, a few days since I've talked to anybody. I'm kind of getting lonely. I'm sick of watching TV. I'm sick of playing cards. Knock, knock, knock. And this person convinces me to let them in. Nice person, nice suit, shiny shoes, talks well. Actually, they even brought me a coffee. So I let them in. And they sit and they talk to me for 2 or 3 hours and they listen. And then when they pounce that sale thing on me, I think, wow, this person was so nice. They wouldn't rip me off. I'm going to tell you about a case at the end where they did. We also, as we get older, we suffer from psychological and physical deterioration. We're less mobile. We don't think so quickly anymore. And it's very easy for those predators to get ahead of us. We're specifically targeted by the criminal element. And this is really important to know. It's a rude kind of title, but that's what they call it. They call it a suckers list. So you will get something in the mail that will prompt you to send money to an organization that is not totally legal and above board. So what happens is, then they send you another request for more money, and you send more money. And it can be in the mail or on the internet. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the mail, in the mail. It can also be by phone calls. So what happens then is that company sells your name to other companies, hence the suckers list. And you will start to get multitudes upon multitudes upon multitudes of mail, of email, and telephone calls. So my theory to this is, when somebody comes knocking on my door or calls me on the phone, I use this phrase, and please feel free to use it anytime. I always tell them, listen, buddy, if I want meat, I go to the butcher. I don't expect the butcher to come knocking on my door. And they usually go away. Next one. And the last thing is that caregivers are from less reputable backgrounds than we think they are. Okay, we've become a very trusting society. We grew up in an era where a handshake was a contract, and it's just not like that anymore. Okay. Okay. So who are the abusers? Family members are the usual suspects. I've already talked about that. Caregivers. Caregivers can be in a hospital setting, in a nursing home setting, in a residential home. It can be somebody that's coming into your home once a week to help you clean or provide meals. That can be a service agent, or it can be someone that you have employed privately. Because just because they're sent by an agency doesn't mean that they are good, upstanding people. They may start out that way, but debt and gambling is on the rise. Gambling debt is just a horrific thing, especially now with access to the internet. Anybody can go on the internet and play poker, and it puts them in a state of debt. Strangers on the phone, door to door, malls, coffee shops. You'll be amazed. If you go and sit in a mall or a coffee shop, you'll be amazed how many times you can see an older person sitting alone and how many times you'll see them approached by a young person. Do they know them? I don't know. And I want you to pay attention to this next one, because who's not up there? Professionals, bankers, lawyers, accountants, doctors. Who's not up there? Police officers. That means you can trust every police officer that you talk to, right? Wrong. Okay. But professionals can be abusers too. So, be on guard. Be aware that can happen. Non-financial institution advisors, the bank gentleman spoke about that briefly, so I'm not going to go into detail too much with that. But basically, know who you're dealing with. If you're giving your money to someone, you may not be drawing your $50,000 out of the bank, putting it in a brown bag and giving it to the person, but you may as well be. Because that's literally what you're doing when you're signing that paper saying, yes, I agree, blah, blah, blah. So check with your bank, check with lawyers, make sure that you know. Vulnerability is the key, and everybody, as we get older, we're all in a position of weakness. And we're all in a position where somebody is going to take advantage of us. We just have to be on guard. So signs of financial abuse, taking money from an elder's bank account that's not going to be used in their interest. And that's the key. If you're a power of attorney, you can only use their money in a way that will be advantageous to them. So let me give you an example. If I'm this gentleman's power of attorney and I decide that I'm going to, buy myself a fur coat, and it's $10,000, is that going to be okay? No. Why? He can borrow the fur coat anytime he likes. It's not my money, and that fur coat is not going to be for his prime use. It's for me. So, selling elders' property or transferring property inappropriately. I'm going to give you a story about that. I told Adam about this just before I started my presentation. He was kind of shocked. Halton. Everybody knows where Halton is, right? It's between Hagersville and Toronto. It's an area, it's pretty big, large population. I just finished reading a case law last night of a case that was appealed, and fortunately the appeal didn't go through successfully. And it's an elderly female who is 86 years old, I think she is now. She had $1 million in her bank account. She had 2 homes in Canada, one that she was living in and one that she rented out. They were both mortgage-free. She had another home in Florida that she used as a seasonal residence when she was younger. But as she got older and was less mobile, she rented it out as a holiday income for her. So you can imagine, this lady was very well off, very comfortable. Her spouse was deceased. She had one son. He was 49 years old. Always been a bit of a problem child, but as far as the community was concerned, he was an upstanding citizen. He went to work every day. He was married. He had a couple of kids. And all of a sudden, his marriage fails, and he's back living home with mom. And nobody seemed to know why. It was kind of a secret, right? There's a bit of a clue. Secrets. Secrets ain't good. So he moves back in with mom. And people see her less and less in the community. And when they do see her, she seems to be losing weight. But nobody does anything. Nobody says anything. Because you know why? It's a thing called ageism. It's almost as bad as racism. As we get older, we're expected to become frail. We're expected to lose weight. We're expected to be all those things that people outside looking in can see. That's not necessarily going to happen. It can, but you know, that ageism thing tends to make most people turn a blind eye. Not good. So, unfortunately, because nobody offered any kind of assistance to this lady, nobody notified any outside agencies. His gambling, which it turned out, that's why his marriage had broken down, his gambling had become so bad that he was in debt to all kinds of bad people. So he took out a mortgage. First of all, he sold the whole home in Florida without her knowing, because he was the power of attorney. And he managed to convince the bank that she'd gone cuckoo. And then he remortgaged the home because he managed to convince the bank, who this one particular bank person that he dealt with, they were friends, they'd grown up together. So there was a level of trust there. And in fairness to the bank person, he had no idea that his friend was in such dire straits. So his friend shows up at the bank and says, you know, sadly my mother passed away. Here's the will. As you can see, I'm the sole heir. I'm in a little bit of debt. I need $20,000 right away to pay for a funeral and get, you know, me out of some debt. How can I do that? I've got this idea I can remortgage the house. So the bank says yes. So he remortgages the first house for, I think, $80,000. And of course, that money very quickly goes. So he goes back to the bank and he remortgages the second house and he gets $65,000. So over a number of years, this lady who has 3 properties that are all mortgage-free and $1 million in the bank ends up with 0. No properties. There's so much debt garnered against these properties eventually. No money in the bank, and guess where she lives now? Actually, she's in a homeless shelter. That's pretty awful, eh? And his defense was, well, I'm going to get it anyway. What difference does it make? So, you know, and unfortunately, it leaves people that were involved in that case with a lot of regrets, and we can't get it back. It's gone. So there's a perfect example of selling money. Credit card use, never, ever, 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 ever allow anybody to use your credit card or your bank card. Never, ever. Because when you do, and you come to me and you say, you know, Mary used my credit card and she stole $20,000 worth of stuff, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say, well, first of all, why did you give her your credit card? Why did you give her your PIN number? Why did you give her your bank card? Because the bank is not going to secure or insure any of that stuff because you gave her your information. And it makes it very difficult for me to prove the aspect of theft. Okay? So never, ever, ever give your personal details away. Don't give loans because most of the time they're not going to be repaid. The average attitude towards older people is, they're not going to miss it because they're going to die. Okay? So if I can hold out not paying this loan back for as long as I can, they'll be dead and nobody will know. Don't make loans. It sounds very harsh what I'm saying, but I'm telling you what's told to me by bad people. That's what they say. And a misuse of power of attorney, which is very common. Beware of if you are associated with an older person and suddenly they've got all these new friends on the horizon. And then these new friends start moving in. Because one of the common things that is happening right now from a scam perspective is you'll be sitting in a mall, you'll be alone, a young person will target you, they'll watch you for a while, they'll befriend you. An example is a lady, an old lady was targeted by a young lady who gave her this sob story that her husband was abusive and bad things were happening at home. So the old lady took pity on her. And finally, the young lady said, I got to get out of there, you know, it's getting worse. He's hitting me, I got bruises on me that you can't see. Now he started beating the kids. I could handle it while he beat me, but I can't handle it while he's beating the kids. So guess what? The kind lady says, come and live with me. So they do, and you know, once they're in, it's pretty hard to get them out. And from the perspective of being old and making reports, we get embarrassed because we feel foolish. So we don't call the police and we don't tell our friends. We tell our friends that everything's okay. and it isn't. So don't let him in. Don't open the gate, because the horse will bolt. And repeated visits to the home by sellers. This will happen if you make any kind of negotiation from a financial perspective at your home, you will be inundated. They will not leave you alone. They will come back, they will come back, they will come back until you have no money left. And then when you have no money left, they'll help you get a loan, and they'll still keep coming back. And that's going to be my case at the end. So signs of financial abuse. Banking, obviously there's going to be some inconsistencies with the bank. ATM use is inconsistent with the customer profile, and the banks are getting really good with this now. At first they weren't so good, but they're getting really good now, especially the banks that work with me, because they're my friends. They tell me, you know, it's not unusual for a bank to phone and say, I think you need to maybe visit Mary Smith on the corner because there might be something not so good going on there. They can't give me information about your financial records, but they can give me a little hint that something's not quite right. So that's good to know, right? If there's unusual or frequent cash withdrawals, credit card activity, these are all things that you should be looking for on your loved one's bank statements. Liquidating assets where a penalty is incurred. So for example, a person may have an RRSP because they're not quite 70 yet, and all of a sudden you see that the RRSP's been liquidated. There would be a penalty associated with that. Why would they do that? Why would mom do that? She doesn't need that $5,000 right now. Beware of that. Changing account holders or adding a new signer. Again, this goes back to how vulnerable we become, how easy it is to manipulate us as we get older. Beneficiary designation changes. That's a big one. And banks and lawyers are doing really great jobs of really questioning you now. If you go there, are you sure you want to do this, Mrs. Smith? Is your lawyer aware of this? Why don't we phone your son and ask him what he thinks? And the banks again, not a good thing to change a beneficiary without good reason and without seeking advice from a lawyer. And direct complaint from customers of theft or financial abuse. More signs of financial abuse. You'll go to a bank appointment, and the person that is abusing you is sitting right next to you. So what can you say? You can't really tell the truth because they're listening to everything you say. Okay, the banks are getting good with that now. They're kicking them out and saying, you know, I want to talk to Mary alone. Same thing with on the phone stuff too. They want to speak for the client or provide instructions. Again, the banks are telling them, you know, get out. This is a private meeting. We need to talk alone. And if you don't have a will, you should have a will. Wills are not expensive documents to create. My advice would be to go to a lawyer, but you can create a will online and have it notarized by a commissioner of oaths. But in any event, when you have that will, you need to have copies given to trusted people. And I don't mean you need to give that will to your son who's going to be the beneficiary. I mean you need to have a copy with your lawyer. You need to have a copy with your financial institution so that they know what's going to happen when you pass away. And if you change any of the conditions of that will, you need to remember to let those people know. And again, another sign would be incurred debt. So estate problems. Next one. Yeah. So estate problems, unfortunately with estate problems, you don't know about it till the person's dead, okay? So, you know, you may think that mom has, you know, $100,000 in a bank account because that's consistently what you've been led to believe, or $100,000 in what's it called? Investments, because that's what you've been led to believe, and you don't know any differently because you haven't really involved yourself with mom. You know, there's been a little bit of a neglect going on there. You haven't kind of visited once a week like you should, and maybe engaged, taken coffee, maybe invited them for supper, had that fireside chat. And then the next thing you know, mom passes away, and you think, where's all the freaking money gone? Well, it's gone to that lady that she met in the mall that brought the 3 kids around last year, okay? So Joint account designations, I already talked about that. Please don't do it. Unless it's a spouse who you have lived with for the last 50 years, don't do it. If you're a newly single person and you just met someone and you've been with them 5-10 years, do not give them access to your financial stuff. You know, people can fool you for 5 or 10 years. Don't do it. Don't change your beneficiary unless you really, really have to. And just be aware. Use due diligence in everything. Often people, I had a case a few years ago in Simcoe, and it was a sad case because it was an old lady who had been befriended by a young man. He was 18 years old, and he was well known to me as a police officer. You know, I had dealt with him since he was a young fellow. And he had a bit of a drug addiction. He tried to get clean, and he befriended this old lady. And one of the ways that he had befriended her was by mowing her lawn in the summertime, and then in the wintertime he would go and clear her snow. And he did a great job for about a year, probably the time that he was clean. And he got involved in drugs again, and in that time that he was doing well, he moved into a house, and he you know, spent several nights in a room that she assigned to him. And I'm going to give you her first name. Her first name is Dorothy. She's still alive, God bless her, and her husband had passed away 30 years ago, and she wasn't a well-off lady. She's quite poor, really, if I'm honest. She lives in a tiny, tiny little house, and she had some jewelry in a box, and some of the items of jewelry were wedding rings, and most of the jewelry didn't have great value, but sentimental value, you just can't replace that. And unfortunately, this young fellow had gotten himself into a state where he was stealing from her. She didn't tell anyone because she was embarrassed. And when I finally found out about it, it was through a friend of hers. And I found out that one day he'd asked her for money, and she said, "I don't have any," and he had slapped her across the face. So I arrested him for assaulting her. But in the interim, during my investigation, we found out that her box of jewelry that she thought she'd hidden really well under the bed, he had found. And he'd pawned most of her jewelry, not to a pawn shop, but to a local drug dealer. He basically traded the jewelry for drugs. And I couldn't prove that, so I couldn't write a warrant. And I did go knocking on the drug dealer's door, and the conversation was less than pleasant. And unfortunately, I never did get any jewelry back for her. The only good thing was that we got him out of the house and she wasn't being abused anymore. But, you know, there's so many sad stories. You have to really, really guard against stuff like that. Next. So how do you prevent being abused? Well, police involvement for criminal activities such as fraud or theft, forgery and extortion. Please, please, please don't be afraid to call the police, okay? I personally, if you call and you get problems from a police officer, call me, because I will be very, very upset if somebody sends you away dissatisfied. I would rather spend 2 hours explaining to you why we can't do anything than not understanding your issue or not hearing your issue. All our interviews with you are confidential. We won't tell anyone unless you want us to tell someone. Of course, if it becomes a court issue, then I can't promise that confidentially anymore, because when it goes to court, the courtroom is a public venue. Any instructions from a client to a customer should be direct, not through a third party. So if you are, let me give you a very simple example. Let's say you need to phone your cable company because you want some TV shows added or taken away. You should be doing that yourself. Don't even entrust someone to do that on your behalf. But on a bigger scale, when you're dealing with the banks and it's your money, don't trust someone to make that call for you, because for them to be able to relay information accurately to your bank, you have to give them an awful lot of information, probably more than you really would want to. So make those calls yourself. If you have to, make an appointment, go see the bank. Banks are getting really good with older people now. They're making time for our generation. Okay, they're not turning us away. Review documents very, very carefully. If you don't understand a document, find someone that you can trust, probably your bank person or a lawyer, to go over those documents with you. Involve other family members and friends, but only, and I underline only, if you can trust them. You can make a report to public guardian and trustee. Public guardian and trustee, everybody gets scared of them. They say, oh my gosh, they're going to come and take all my money away and give it to the government. They don't. The public guardian and trustee will only act or investigate incidences where there's a level of incapacity, or if there's a suspicion of abuse and the person has no family members that can help. So the public guardian and trustee really is our friend. As we get older, they are our friend. And you know, really, if they have to take over your estate because of an incapacity and you're in a nursing home, they're entitled to take a fee of, I think it's between 4 and 10%. It could be 4 or 6, but I'm going to say 4 or 10%, between 4 and 10%. But a power of attorney is entitled to the same fee. So you're not paying any more to the public guardian and trustee than you would to a power of attorney, because they can charge you a fee for acting on your behalf. So now, you need to refer to appropriate agencies. I think we went ahead of time, but that's okay. Yeah? Okay, so I didn't talk about confronting them? Okay, so you need to confront your suspected abuser, and if you aren't able to do that, you phone me, because I really like doing that. Okay, so give me a call. Grandparent scams are not on there, but I wrote a note at the bottom. Grandparent scams, this is a phone call where you will usually get a phone call, and the most recent one is somebody will phone and they'll say, hi Grandma, hi Grandpa, it's Freddie. Okay, and you may or may not have a grandson called Freddie, but it might sound like Eddie, and you do have a grandson called Eddie. You've got the TV on in the background, hearing's not what it used to be, the brain's not thinking quite as fast because he says, hi Grandma, it's Freddie, I'm in jail, and the police officer here wants $3,000 to let me go, and then he wants another $3,000 because my car's been taken, and you know, they're being real jerks, and I haven't done anything wrong, Grandma, you know what I'm like, I love you, and hey Grandma, you got to help me, because if Dad finds out, he's gonna beat the bleep, 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 bleep out of me. Okay. Now, there's a few problems with that, I'm going to tell you from a police officer's perspective, because if Adam here is my grandson, and this nice police officer here arrests him, he's not going to let Adam phone me and demand this money. This nice police officer is maybe going to call me and say, your grandson's in jail, we'll be holding a bail hearing, and he may need a surety. Are you willing to provide surety for him? And then he's going to explain to me what surety means. Surety does not mean that I'm going to give money to the police. That does never, never happen. So if you get a panic call from any family member saying, the police have arrested me and they won't let me go and they've got my car and the kids are screaming and blah, 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 hang up the phone, because it's not true. We don't do that. We're mean, but we're not that mean. And I think it was the lawyer that talked about the toll-free numbers earlier, that if you call those numbers and there's a fee, those minimum fees start at $2 a minute, just so you know. Okay? And they can go anywhere up to, I think, $12 a minute. So just so you know. Okay, so prevention. Network with other professionals. Educate yourself. I've left some stuff on the back table there, and it's got frequently asked questions about elder abuse, financial abuse. It's also got a full page on the back for useful numbers of agencies that you can contact. Education is choice. So arm yourself with knowledge, okay? There are restrictions imposed by privacy legislation, and this gets really frustrating. It's really frustrating for me as a police officer, because if you come to me and you say, you know, I think I've got $500,000 missing from my bank account because somebody scammed me. And I go to the bank and I knock on the bank door and I say, can you give me Mrs. Smith's bank account, please? Because she thinks she's missing $500,000 and I just need to go over her bank records. The bank's not going to give that to me. I have to write warrants and all kinds of judicial papers. It's very difficult for me to track that. It can take me months, years. We have cases at my detachment that are 18 months and ongoing. The best way for you to help me is to come to the police station, make sure you're talking to a police officer, sign a consent form so that I can access the minimum information that I need to then write my warrants, okay? But privacy works for us as well because it protects us. Power of attorney. Are there any power of attorneys in the room? Okay. Do you know your legal obligations, power of attorneys? Do you know your legal obligations? Do you know that you're only allowed to purchase any items that are going to benefit the person that you're caring for? That you can't purchase anything that's personally beneficial to you? Do you know that you're obligated under law to keep receipts for every transaction that you make? And you know that you can only make transactions, not transfers of accounts. But final thoughts, as population ages in increasing numbers, which it is doing, incidents of financial and other abuse will obviously increase. As a community, we must continue to improve our methods of detecting, preventing, and dealing with abuse. That's why you're all here today. As professionals, we perhaps have an increased responsibility to be ever watchful in protecting our elderly. They deserve nothing less. Now I'm going to give you, if you want to just put my contact info up there. That's my contact info. Please write it down. After my last presentation, I did have some communication by email. I may not be able to get back to you right away. I am an investigator, so I'm incredibly busy, but I will get back to you eventually. So please don't be afraid to contact me. I'm just going to give you, right now, we have a big scam going on in Haldeman and Norfolk that I want you to be aware of. I can't give you names because, unfortunately, it breaches their privacy. You know, bad people get protected by privacy just like good people do. But there's a door knock going on right now where they are selling paved driveways. And it's a scam. Driveways. Driveways. And there's a second scam going on with water heaters. So if you get a door knock, I am going to say to you, if you get a door knock for any kind of sale at your home, close the door. Close the door in the face. You don't have to be polite with these people, but you don't have to be rude. As long as you don't assault them, the minute that you tell them to leave, they, under law, under common law, are obligated to leave. Unfortunately, every residence in Canada, the pathway to your front door is considered a silent invitation for someone to come and knock on your door. Which I guess is good, I guess is bad. But here's the clincher. As soon as you tell them, sir or madam, I want you to leave my property, you are trespassing. Under common law rules, they have to leave. And if they don't, you call the police and they can be charged with trespass to property. Okay? So please don't be afraid to close the door on someone's face. Do, however, tell them, get off my property first, because then when the police arrive, they have some ammunition to work with. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you about this case in Delhi. It's an elderly male. His property is a dated property. It's quite a large property. They had no town service. It was a well system. And the well was lots of sulfur in the water. So if it's not treated, there's a really strong smell all the time, but if it's not treated, the water goes black. And he had this system that was working. It was put in by a reputable company, and it was time for him to change the filtration cartridges. And all of a sudden, he gets a knock on the door, and it's a water filtration company who are trying to sell him more equipment. Unfortunately, I'm going to call my person Mr. M. I can't say his name because it's before the courts. So Mr. M, because he's older and he's getting to the stage where he's a little confused, somehow he thinks that This person who's knocking on his door selling him water equipment, he's actually the person that's coming to change his water filtration